There we go. That catchy music. Welcome back, folks. It's Dave Brannen here. Glad to have you back for another day of Ask a Lawyer Live. Today, I'm going to be talking about a favorite topic, very timely because I just got off a consultation call with someone on this very issue. Now, their issue was related to long-term disability, but today we're going to be talking about CPP disability. And the big question is, when can you run a small business, do freelance work, or any type of self-employment work without losing your CPP disability benefits? This comes up a lot because people often can't go back to traditional employment when you're on disability to do full-time jobs and things like that, but they still want to sometimes try to do something, some type of gig work, small business activities, just to get a little extra income. Certainly CPP disability does allow you to have a certain amount of income, but the problem is CPP disability does have strict rules and self-employment doesn't always fit within those rules. So this is something to be careful of. Let's look at our presentation here. Okay. So to start off with, let's start with the core CPP disability rule. The foundation is, what is a severe and prolonged disability? What is a disability? So to qualify for CPP disability, you must have a disability that is severe and prolonged. That means it must prevent you from regularly pursuing substantially gainful employment. Those words are very important. They're found right in the legislation of CPP. Regularly pursuing substantially gainful employment. So what we're going to be looking at whenever we consider, like, can I do this or can I do that? We have to go back to, is this an example? If you do that thing, are you regularly pursuing substantially gainful employment? The word regularly is very important. Substantially gainful is very important. So here's the key. Service Canada is not only looking at how much money you earn, they're also looking at your capacity to work. So even if your income is very low, if the activity you're doing looks like real work, they may decide that you no longer qualify. Now, this is very important because just because you're not making any profits in your work does not mean that your CPP won't consider you still capable of working. That is a very important distinction. So what counts as work? Self-employment, again, is tricky because income won't tell the whole story. Service Canada looks at the actual activities you're doing, what you're performing, not necessarily just the income or earnings that you have. So they'll look at things like, how many hours per week are you working? What type of tasks are you doing? What are the physical and mental demands of what you're doing? Like, what are you physically and mentally required to do? Whether you're making business decisions or if you're just following someone else's orders. They'll also look at whether this is something that is sustainable in the long term. So let's look at a few examples. These are ones that I've seen come up. I had this person contact me years ago. Was an a graphic designer who had chronic fatigue and who took on a few projects here and there over the year. They often miss deadlines. They can't take on regular clients. So it was literally just doing work on Upwork or one of these kind of places. They would just take work when they could. And as long as there wasn't tight deadlines, they were able to do it. But they would need a lot of time to finish the projects. Now, that may still be consistent with CPP disability because it's not sustainable or regular. So that situation, I advised the person that what they were doing, I felt like it was not going to be sustainable or regular work, and therefore it would not qualify as substantially gainful. Certainly the income they were earning was still well below the thresholds of the $20,000 a year for substantially gainful work. And I think they're even below at that time the $5,000 or $6,000 a year level of where you have to actually report it to Service Canada. Okay, now here's another example. Now, the one I talked to today was very close to this, not exactly the same. But think of someone who runs an online shop, but it's mostly run by their spouse. They're just doing the odd things here and there. That's an example. That's an example where you probably will still be considered disabled if the online shop is mostly run by your spouse. That kind of situation, you probably will still be considered disabled, but it is getting close to the line. Just give me a second here. But for you to be considered not working, you would really have to have very minimal involvement. So maybe you're doing some packing and shipping of things. It's going to really be on the line. They're going to really look at how much are you really doing, and is it possible that you're doing more work than what you're reporting, and this kind of thing. Now, the last one would be a landscaper with severe back pain who just manages crews. They're doing like estimates and client meetings, just telling people what to do. So even if they've got other people doing all the actual labor work, this would likely be seen as working because the management duties show capacity to work. So this is one where it can easily slip into being working. This would be someone who did a lot of their own landscaping work, and then through back pain, they couldn't do as much. So they focused more on management things, hiring out other people. They're probably making less money than they used to sometimes. Sometimes they make more this way. But again, the amount of money you're making won't be determined. They will look at, like, are you actually doing management work? And in that kind of situation, probably the answer would be yes. All right. There's more examples. And if people have questions, then I can go over those as well. So when do you have to report? One of the biggest mistakes you can make is failing to report, or not reporting soon enough. Or maybe you think, well, I'm only going to report the profit and not going to report the overall business income because the profit is the way I'm going to look at it. You have to be very careful. So say if you only made $1,000 from your business a year, but what you don't report is that you spent 20 hours a week doing bookkeeping, making phone calls, advertising, then you could be in trouble, right? So the fact that you only made $1,000 from the business in profit is not as relevant as the fact that you're working 20 hours a week doing work. So if you just told them I made $1,000 and didn't reveal the rest of the information, you could be in trouble because they could deem you capable of work. If you're regularly working 20 hours a week doing bookkeeping style work, making phone calls and things, they're going to deem you able to work, regardless of that, the fact that you only made $1,000. The other thing too is, like, sometimes where I tell people to be very careful is when you're running your own business or you're working for a family business, expenses and things can be very manipulated. So if you say, like, they'll want to know what your gross income is before expenses, then they will examine your expenses to see if they're legitimate. So if you report gross income of like 5,000, but you're saying my expenses are 4,000, they're going to say, well, are they really? They'll look at your expenses to see, are you overinflating the expenses, or are you putting non-business expenses in there? Like, so they will really scrutineer these numbers to figure out what's reasonable. So what you really want to know is what tasks are you doing, how often, how much effort does it take? It's really focused on the amount of effort and physically what you're doing, not so much the money. The money is important, but you could be making no money and working 20 hours a week in a business, because self-employment business, you would be considered working and not the fact that you're not earning money it doesn't matter. You'd be demonstrating capacity to work. If you fail to let them know and they later deem that you were working, you would have to repay money. They would suspend benefits and all that kind of thing. So it's better to be very upfront with them about any kind of work when you're getting into substantial numbers of hours and things. Okay, so keeping your business while on CPP disability, that happens with a lot of people. It is possible to sometimes keep a business and stay on CPP. It can happen if you delegate almost everything to others. You only do very limited tasks occasionally, and the activity that you're doing is irregular, so it's not regular, and it's not substantially gainful. So you'd have to be earning less. Like the activity, the work that you're doing would have to pay someone a salary less than what would be substantially gainful, and you also have to be doing that on an irregular basis. If you're showing up to work every day, doing regular work, even if your salary is very low, they're going to think that you're manipulating these things, and you would probably not qualify for CPP disability. All right. So things like that could include things like a taxi driver or an accountant an accountant who just does a few tax returns a year for friends. A taxi driver has a license and maybe they lease it out, but they're not really driving anymore themselves. That could be things where you could get the income and it's not considered working. Now, because in both kind of situations, you're not really demonstrating regular capacity to work. Okay, so let's talk about avoiding benefit suspensions. A little bit of coffee there. So number one, be transparent. The thing I advised the person today I was speaking with is that I really advise them to be very transparent with the insurer. Just lay it all out for them. Get them all of the gross income, show them all the expenses, and let them come to their own conclusions rather than just reporting what your profit is, because you can manipulate that. Even if you're not manipulating it, they will think that it's possible that you can, and they will be very, very they're going to be very suspicious. So they're going to want to see all of the receipts. You want to keep a lot of records. If you say, "Oh, I don't have any business records. Oh, I don't have those receipts," and then they're going to just assume you're lying. So you have to document everything very good. Now, if it's a small enough business, you probably are not having prepared financial statements, but at the very least, you should have some accounting system that allows you to print out like annual reports of profits and losses and all these kinds of things. You have to do it at that level, or you're going to run into a lot of problems because they're just going to assume the worst. You have to be able to show them that you're organized and here's all the information, and then they're more likely to accept what the situation is and allow you to keep working, as long as if you show them what the business income and what your role in the business is. The more transparent you are, the better information you have, the more likely they are to accept it. Okay. Now, it's important too to have medical notes that explain why you're not capable of working regularly. Again, if we go back to that definition, it's regularly working in a substantially gainful employment. So a lot of what you want to get from medical notes is emphasis on that you can't work regularly. That is the number one reason people can't work who have a chronic condition. They may be able to do short spurts of work, but it's the irregular ability to work is what takes them out of the workforce. Also, it's like what I like to see when I'm representing people is failed returns to work. So a failed return to work shows that you have tried, and it is very powerful in a claim for CPP disability or any other type of disability benefit for that matter. Okay, so key takeaways. I think this is my last slide. So very important. Self-employment does not mean automatic suspension of benefits. In fact, you are on both LTD and CPP disability. You are allowed to earn some amount of income without losing your benefits or without even having your benefits cut off or reduced in any way. That is possible to do. In fact, CPP doesn't even want to know about your income unless it crosses a certain threshold. I forget exactly what it is for 2025. I'd have to look it up, but it's probably in the $6,000-$7,000 range. I'd have to look it up to see exactly what it is. So what matters is your capacity for work, not your income. That's the point, that the fact that you're not making any money doing your self-employment business is not as important as, are you doing the self-employment business on a regular basis, a certain number of hours a week? Like once you're getting over like 15 hours a week, that's when it's going to start raising eyebrows that you may be capable of doing part-time work. Now, that may not be enough to lose long-term disability benefits, but to lose CPP disability benefits, you could, if you're demonstrating the ability to regularly work a certain number of hours every week. All right. So again, finally, transparency, extremely important. Keep documentation, give all the information to CPP or the LTD. Let them decide what they want to do. You could, if you don't like their decision, you can always dispute it. What you want to avoid is like you're kind of lying to yourself and not telling them everything. And then they find out 5 years later, and now they're coming back after you because they're going to say, well, you were reporting income of $500, but you're overstating your expenses. So really your income was closer to $1,500. You were overstating your expenses. So we want to be repaid $1,000 a month for the last 3 years. So now all of a sudden you're into like $30,000 of, almost $40,000 of money owed. You don't want to be in that situation. Okay. So thanks for joining me on this topic. I'm now going to move over to take questions. And we do have a few questions here already queued up. Let's see. Hey, Tyler, welcome back. Now, it looks like you have agoraphobia, can't go outside, persistent recreational therapist who wants me to do walks and play sports and go outside. Should I trust my recreational therapist or not? Yes, you should. The thing with agoraphobia, like one of the ways to treat it is to do short activities to slowly acclimatize yourself from getting out of the house. So I would trust the recreational therapist. Not knowing anything about the situation, my general response would be to trust them. And that is a normal treatment approach for someone with that condition. And it says here, as much as I want to get better, I feel like my recreational therapist just wants to cut me off. I don't know your recreational therapist. That could be true, but probably they are not wanting to get you cut off. They're just wanting what's best for you and to get out of the house. Just having the ability to leave the house for walks and things, that would not demonstrate a capacity to work for someone with a condition of agoraphobia. That would be just means you have fear of public spaces and being out. You want to remain confined in your house, a familiar spot, for those of you who may not know what that is. So I would not see this as a situation where even if you were going out of the house doing some of these things, that is going to cause problems necessarily. More problems would happen if this is being recommended and you're not giving some effort to try to do it. That could be a situation where you're not following medical advice, and that could be grounds to stop the benefits in and of itself. So you're always better to follow medical advice to some extent, not to some extent, but to the extent that you can in good faith, to avoid the insurer taking the view that you're ignoring medical advice, because that is usually a grounds for terminating benefits, even if you otherwise would qualify. Okay. All right. Rakesh has a very good question. How would they know you are working a self-employed business? Very good question. They have ways of, we're talking CPP disability. CPP disability, usually from the forms and things you fill out when you're applying, you sign over the rights for them to I forget how it's worded, but basically they can audit. Revenue Canada does audits, or Service Canada does audits with Revenue Canada. I don't know. But what happens is they just cross-reference all the people that are receiving CPP disability. They cross-reference that with Revenue Canada for anyone who's reporting income over a certain level, right? So like, for one thing, you can't be a recipient of CPP disability and also paying into it. So that will flag you in the system if you start getting a job that starts paying into the CPP on your behalf. That would flag it. It could also get flagged if they just cross-reference you as a CPP recipient with names of people who are making income. Now, you're saying that it's a self-employed business. A lot of self-employed business may be in your name. Well, almost always they will, unless it's a corporation. Now, if it's a corporation, it does get harder for them just to do that Revenue Canada cross-reference. But there are other ways, like they can find it out through someone reporting you. That's usually the way they can find it out. So someone is disgruntled, a jilted lover, an ex-husband, an ex-wife, a girlfriend, boyfriend, a cousin who doesn't like you, a neighbor who doesn't like you. Someone can report you. That is a very common way for this to come up. When you get reported that way, Service Canada has an investigation unit, and they will do things like surveillance. They'll start doing online surveillance. They'll write to you for information. They'll audit things through. They will then go to Revenue Canada to audit things. So that is a way that it could be found out. Now, even if you're running a business, the people who report you could say, "Here's the name of the business." They can then go pull the business records and see that you are a president, a shareholder, or a secretary, or whatever, like that you have some role in the business. That's how that can come about. Other ways is if you are running a business, there are like private investigators. Business registries are public, so they can cross-reference your name with business registries to find out if you've registered any business names, any active companies, and all that kind of stuff. So these are the ways that they find out. The other ways would be just, they would have to be audited. Like usually for CPP, it has to come from reporting or from one of these audits that they just do for everybody. But certainly if you have things on social media, a lot of ways they find out is people are running businesses, and they are, especially little small self-employment businesses. A lot of ways people do that is through posting on Facebook that they're having this event, that they're selling a certain thing or whatever like that. They can see those posts, and that can be evidence of your working. So that's how they find out. Another way to find out would be you mention it to your doctor and it gets in your medical records. And at some point, the medical records get sent to the insurance company or the CPP disability. And then upon reviewing the medical records, there's little references to you working, and that will red flag. All right. Now, I got a question here that we get all the time that I thought was worth talking about since we're already on this topic. Rental income. A lot of people want to know this. So what about rental income? Does that count as working while on CPP disability or long-term disability insurance? Okay. So rental income by itself is usually considered passive income. Passive income means not working. So if you simply own a property and collect rent, or even if you like rent an apartment and then you sub-rent a room out to someone else, both of those situations are going to be seen as a passive form of income not working. So Service Canada and even Revenue Canada will generally see that as a passive income, not as actual income. The key question is going to be always, are you running a business or are you just passively collecting rent? Now, where it's not a black and white situation, but someone who owns an apartment building and they hire a property manager, likely they are not working. However, if you own an apartment building and you personally handle the tenants, collect rents, you do calls, repairs, the more things you do like that, where you're acting as a property manager, you are going to be seen as doing employment. So just this is why it's not a clear answer always. The question is going to be whether you are collecting rent. Another example would be day trading. That used to be quite popular. I've actually had people call me about this. So certainly if you just have investments, if you have an investment portfolio that earns money, even if it pays dividends, that is generally going to be seen as passive income that is not going to offset your LTD or your CPP disability. However, if you are day trading, so you're actively managing a portfolio of stocks and trades and all these things, and you're doing it every day, every week, if you're doing it on some kind of regular basis of day trading and earning money off of day trading, then that is going to be seen as work. It will not be seen as passive. And Revenue Canada will treat it that way as well. Okay. See if we got any other questions. Looks like we do. Does the landlord have to sell their property in order to qualify for LTD? No, not necessarily. It really depends. Like, you're allowed to keep the property, but you cannot act as a property manager. Like, you can't keep the property and still do all the repairs and collect rents. And like, you might be able to collect rent, but if you're collecting rent and doing repairs, taking calls, like, the more active you are in managing that property, then you're going to be in trouble. I've had people on disability who own a bunch of like Airbnbs, and I tell them that's fine. But if you're the one going in and doing all the cleaning and doing this and doing that, like, that is going to soon turn into you working and not having this as a passive income. So you don't necessarily have to sell, but you have to figure out, like, if your intention is to continue to manage the properties, then you're going to be on there's a fine line that's at some point you may cross the fine line. Okay. Get any more questions in here if you have them, folks. I'm going to go look at our forum. Looks like we do have a few questions in the Resolute Legal forum. Let me bring those up. All right. So this is the forum. Let's take a peek here and answer some questions. You guys can help me out here. LTD and retraining, I think. Oh, this does look like a new one, actually, 2 days. Okay, so let's look at this one. Okay, that's very long, but let's see if we can get the gist of it here. So someone who's burned out from a traumatic event at work, got a PTSD, they've been off for a while. They're in the own occupation. Oh, yeah, they're in the own occupation period. Clear that they can't go back to their old job. Makes sense. This is a common scenario. They don't want to go back to their old job because of the burnout and the bad experiences. So they're looking to move on once they get to the any occupation. You know what? I talked about this one last week. Already. Yeah. So I've already answered this one. I didn't put an answer in here. I thought I would let other people. So this was one where they were saying, this question really was, look, they don't want to go back to their old job. They want to be able to go to school. And will the LTD allow them to go to school to be self-employed? Because they don't think they can work. The nature of their illness is that they can't work under other people's authority. So they want to know, will the LTD pay for them, keep paying benefits while they go to school? Let's see what people said. Caro, who is a very well-known and respected, I don't know who Caro is, but they're constantly answering questions on here, and a very good person from what I can tell. Very good with their questions. Says, hi, I think the only way this would be possible is part of a return to work program. It is, as you have guessed, a high-risk area. I would book a consultation with Resolute Legal before doing anything. Yeah, that's something they could do. I agree with Caro. Talk to a lawyer first. My gut says you'll be cut off. Yeah. I don't think this is going to fly. This is something they were going to pay for the program themselves. I don't have the capacity to do it. I stop. I will have a new career and ability to work for myself, ease into employment. I want to get off LTD and be productive. Yeah. Just can't afford to lose the LTDs while they retrain. This person says, sorry to hear. Yeah. Yeah. So it's most likely they're going to get cut off. So Neo also brings up the vocational program, which is more balanced. I'm going to like that. Who's the question from? Is Jane Twist. Okay. What's AB2 say? Pretty good. Yeah. Definitely it's better. Okay. I think I'll respond to this. So let me respond. So we're going to say, let's respond. So I'm just going to say thank you for sharing your experience and concerns. This, what you are proposing makes a lot of sense in that it would enable you to transition from LTD to paid employment, which is in both your interest and that of the insurance company. My would be, as others have suggested, to try to use the be upfront with your LTD insurer. It is unlikely they would agree to the arrangement you discuss, but I have been surprised. The more the program is irregular. So sorry, the more the program is done on a regular basis with set times and regular basis, set times and regular per week, the more the insurer can use it to show you have capacity to work. Usually, what will we say here? So if the return to work fails because of your illness, then you can try to get back on long-term disability. Now, some insurers have rehabilitation programs that could fit something like this, but that would be unusual. There we go. That's what we're going to say. So this person could call for advice, but honestly, it'd be kind of a waste of money because this is a very easy thing to answer. Very easy to answer. There we go. Okay. Okay, let's see what else we got here for questions. Status with employer while on long-term disability. Okay, this is a good one. Let's see what this says. I can answer this. It's right up in my wheelhouse. So this one says, I anticipate that I will need to claim long-term disability in the next 2 months. What happens to my employment status with my employer once I move from short-term disability to long-term disability? My company policy states that they will. Oh, wow. This is from a long time ago. What am I doing? Someone must have just replied to this more recently. Okay. Okay. So let's take a look at this. 8 years later, 2 days ago. So they're talking about. Yeah, I don't know really what they're responding to here. Oh, I see. This person's responding. So, okay. This is what the person's saying. My company policy states they will continue paying benefits to employees on LTD. I'm wondering what is legal requirement. Can they just terminate this without cause? Is this likely to happen? I guess what this person is getting at is once they go on long-term disability, they're worried about losing their medical plan. And unfortunately, there is no guarantee once you go on long-term disability that you get to stay on your company's medical plan. Often you can, but that will come down to the deal between your company and the medical plan provider. So that is what it boils down to. There's no guarantee. Now, the termination and stuff like that, people being terminated while on medical leave, that is a delicate thing. Certainly an employer can terminate anybody, but the employer would need to be careful that the termination of somebody on a medical leave is not seen as discrimination. But if there are legitimate reasons for terminating the person that have nothing to do with disability, then they can do it. It's just hard to show that. It's hard to prove that. So just keep that in mind. All right, let's see if there's any other questions here. Let's have a look. Anything else? Medical coordinator. Okay, what's this all about? So this person was asking about a medical coordinator. Oh, yeah. So, yeah. This person's on LTD, and the LTD wants to hire a medical coordinator, and they wanted to know, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And I basically said, instincts are correct. The only reason an LTD insurer would hire a medical coordinator would be to try to continue to get you better for return to work. There's no other reason to do it. They have no other. That's the only reason they would do this. So, and it is true that you likely, if they want to hire such a medical coordinator, you'd have an obligation under your policy to work with the medical coordinator, which is what what people had indicated here, and I said that is correct. So the person says, thanks for your reply, David. It's hard not to be suspicious when this medical work coordinator was brought up after I made a request to communicate in writing. Okay. That's the second time I've asked for something that wasn't acknowledged. First time last year when I asked for my case files and they were ignored by the previous case manager. Okay. What recourse do I have at this point? I know that insurance companies' goal is not to pay out, but can they get away with treating people as if they were criminals? The entire situation has added unnecessarily to the stress, and I wish I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. Yeah. So I think what you have to do with situations like this, you have to review your group insurance policy to see what obligations you have. As I mentioned, you likely have the obligation to participate, to work with the medical as a condition under your policy. My dear, look at all these typos. Wow. I'm lazy. I'll just do the old click and replace. There we go. So even if it wasn't specifically your policy, I would recommend you work with the medical in good faith in any event. So even if this wasn't in your policy and they were suggesting a medical coordinator, you really would still want to work with that person in good faith no matter what, because again, like, you do have a duty. Oh my dear, I can't spell. Coordinator. You still have an obligation to mitigate your losses. And what that would mean is, like, you have an obligation to try to get better. Very hard for you. Like, it doesn't look good if they're recommending a medical coordinator and you're saying no. Because in theory, a medical coordinator is someone who can review the situation, make recommendations. It shouldn't be something that it would be very hard to show to a judge later on that it was reasonable just to refuse it. Like, a judge, well, how do you know? Like, maybe they might have thought of something, and everyone will say, yeah, like, maybe they would come up with something. So better to let them come up with something. And sometimes these medical coordinators like this produce evidence and reports in your favor. Okay. There we go. There we go. Okay. Any other questions from anyone? I'm trying to think if there's any news or anything new. Like I said, I did have some interesting things happening already this week. I've talked with someone who they're on long-term disability, and they have some earnings that they're getting unexpectedly from a small business that, like, I told this person, like, 99% of people that contact me have a small business that makes no money. And the concern then is usually, it doesn't matter that you're not making money. It's that you may be demonstrating regular ability to work. With this person, they really weren't working regularly, but they were making a lot of money. They built an app that just took off. So, like, that is something that can happen. I've only ever had one other person contact me that was selling things on Etsy, and I could not believe how much money this woman was making on Etsy. I don't know if it's still possible to make that much money on Etsy, but she was making something like $70,000 a year on Etsy and was on CPP Disability. And I was like, Houston, you got a problem. Like, there's no world which you can earn $70,000 a year on Etsy. Now, that's before expenses. but still, I don't think her expenses were that high. And there's no way you can earn that kind of money and keep CPP disability on it. Like, not possible. So she was in the process of reporting to them, but she was going to have to pay back some money. Because it kind of, like with him, it kind of got out of control. It just started out as a little bit and then scaled so quickly that with his, it scaled a lot more quickly. With hers, it kind of crept up on her, and then she just finally realized, oh my God, I'm in a mess here. Like, I never thought this was going to be sustainable. I didn't think it was going to last. But that was decades ago. I'm not sure where she's at now. A lot of these things are flash in the pan sometimes. Like, she might have made that money, but it probably was not going to be sustainable forever. Sometimes it can be, but a lot of times, like, even if the platform changes in some way on Etsy, it can take away your earnings. That's why, like, if you do, a lot of people maybe got earnings from selling things on Amazon, but that's another thing that can really very fickle. They can change the rules, and all of a sudden you go from earning money to earning nothing. So a lot of people who attempt self-employment while on disability, it's mostly for your own mental health. Most people are not making a lot of money. They're not making a lot of money. I've had several LTD cases where my clients got cut off because of surveillance related to them doing some type of self-employment craft type work. And insurers took that to mean that they're, like, usually on Facebook, quite frankly, is where they pick up on it. So Facebook will hire these investigators and come up with an investigation report, and these reports will recommend that they stop the benefits and this kind of thing. Now, in most of these cases, we're able to show, like, that the insurer has way overstated what's going on here. One I can think of is, like, one of our clients was doing painting portraits of pets, and was reporting on Facebook, and even had some, like, Google reviews. But if you took the most uncharitable view, it looks like she's generating all this work. But really, when you're like, okay, yes, like, this is her cousin, this is her uncle, this is her grandmother, these reviews are from this, you know what I mean? It was all just family members. She was doing these on a regular basis, painting these portraits, taking forever. These were all within family members, more just supporting her. This was not some great commercial venture. This was all people she knew that were just supporting her, right? Clearly was not grounds for them to terminate her benefits. So we ended up winning that case. Got the person, I can't remember how that one ended. Probably ended up with a lump sum settlement, but I can't remember the exact outcome. I just remember, like, when I got the surveillance report, I'm like, wow, this does look bad. And then we dug into it. Like, no, this is complete BS. Complete BS. Okay. I'm trying to think what else I had going on today. What else did I have going on today that I can talk about? I mean, one thing I can talk about is probably not super interesting to people, but law firm management. We're in the process at Resolute Legal, at the beginning process of reorganizing our firm into pods. So that means we organize our services into pods. So, like, we have a long-term disability pod, a CPP disability pod, an employment pod, and we have a pod for all the services we give to people that are short of litigation. So those would be like those would be paid consultations, any type of representation we do for people that falls short of, like, litigation, where a lawsuit is filed, or we file a human rights complaint, that kind of thing. We weren't organized into pod structures. The structures we had traditionally were lawyers would have multiple types of cases, although some lawyers really only did one type of case anyway, for some of them. But historically, we've had lawyers doing multiple types of cases. Certainly the case managers, who are kind of like the paralegals, legal assistants on our cases, they were spread over different types of cases. So now it's going to be like everybody is working on one type of case in their pod to increase efficiencies and things like that. So I don't know if anyone here is in business management or anything like that, but I learned about this pod thing from a friend of mine. Has a law firm, and I won't say where, but he got bought out by a huge law firm, and that huge law firm brought in all these new policies, and one of them was creating these pods and reorganizing the whole structure. And I was like, dude, I got to learn more about that, because this does seem like would work more efficient. And you're always looking at ways as a law firm. You are a service business, so we're trying to find ways to be more efficient, give better client service. This should speed things up and make us like, we're always looking for ways at how can we turn over somebody's case faster. Most people who come to us, they want to get in and out as fast as possible. No one's interested in a long drawn out case. So constantly looking for ways to speed up the process. Yeah. So as the business owner, I don't really fit into any of the pods. I more kind of, I work to grow the pods and then hand them off to other lawyers. And so I still do a mix of all types of cases. Right now, I do handle all the CPP disability cases in the firm because I'm building that up to get it to the point where I'm going to hand it over to another lawyer to do. But at this point, it's not quite ready for me to do that. Okay, we got a question. If CPP cuts off benefits, cuts benefits, is there a chance LTD will cut benefits as well when they did out? So I mean, they will both assess their situation individually. So if there's a reason, if there's income, like certainly there is plenty of worlds where CPP, you would have capacity to not qualify for CPP disability, but would still qualify for disability from any occupation. So not necessarily. Just because you got cut off a CPP disability because you're doing a certain amount of work would not automatically cut off LTD. Now, if you're doing enough work where you have the capacity to earn $20,000 a year, depending on how much your LTD benefit is, then yes, like they could do an investigation and decide to cut you off too. But if there's a large gap between $20,000 and what the gainful income threshold is for your any occupation LTD, the gainful income occupation, if it's not stated in the policy, is usually defined at around whatever your LTD benefit amount is. So the closer you get to that benefit amount, like your annual benefit amount. So if your annual benefits is $30,000 a year from LTD, and CPP has cut you off because they say you have the capacity to earn 20. Well, there's a $10,000 difference there. LTD may take the view that if you can earn 20, you can earn 30. So they are going to cut you off. But again, there's no real way to say for sure. Okay. Let me see. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Super busy week. Tomorrow, let me look what's on the agenda here tomorrow for me. I think it's another busy day. Oh yeah, another super busy day tomorrow. I'll be back here though. I'll definitely be back for our daily show. This is the one thing I try not to miss unless I'm out of town or traveling, something like that. I try not to miss these. So we'll be back tomorrow. We'll also be back Wednesday, and then I'll be taking the rest of the week off. And I do wish you guys all the best. Thanks for showing up today. We'll see you tomorrow. Have a good one, folks.